Back when I last played The Bouncer, I took note of the appealing menus. There was a kind of sleek minimalism at play that was common in games around the start of the PS2 era. Menus that gave off the impression you were interfacing with some sophisticated OS. At the time I drew a blank on what the game this really reminded me of was, and then it came back to me, Tekken 4. I have a lot of fond memories of this game, and a lot of it had to do with the style. Back in the PS2 generation of consoles, there was this cool aesthetic that was fairly prevalent. I like to call it the digital apocalypse aesthetic. It expressed the idea that with technology advancing at extreme speeds, we'll become one with the machine and lose ourselves as we confront the infinite the digital realm represents. The PS2 was a great time to capitalize on this specific genre, because as we jumped from the PS1 gen to the PS2 gen, graphics took such an insane leap. 3D graphics went from very abstract representations of what they were trying to be to a whole new level of realistic high fidelity. It gave the impression that games were on the verge of becoming not just games, but these virtual realities. And that might sound silly to say now, but the leap was so great, that's really how it felt. I mean, you boot up the PS2, and this earth-shattering noise plays as you're sucked into the digital play space. Then you'd be presented with some detailed virtual woman giving you flirty looks, or reams of nonsensical text flying at you like information is being downloaded directly into your brain. While I don't think Tekken 4 embodies this aesthetic as much as games of the time that were more overtly sci-fi with all their hexagons, or actual plots with themes revolving around simulation and digital control, it does come to mind for me when I think of the mood those types of games brought to the table back then. It uses some of the tropes of this style to frame the franchise's technical advancement as almost menacing or threatening. First of all, you turn on Tekken 4 and immediately you're hit with the Ghost in the Shell chanting. Then discordant jazz and further chants give way to a threatening crescendo. And we're booted to that stark, quiet, minimalist menu like in The Bouncer. You just get the sound of these basic, flat blips in the void. You get the sense the game is kind of indifferent to your presence, like it doesn't need to put on a whole show for you in the menu to get you to play this new lifelike version of Tekken they're about to throw at you. As a kid, I always really got sucked into the character bios that show up before each character's story mode. The ominous music combined with this dispassionate, almost robotic narrator, like it's a machine that's communicating with me rather than a person, set this thick mood.
20 years ago, Kazuya lost to Heihachi and was thrown into the mouth of a volcano. A few days later, he was brought back to life by G Corporation, a biotech firm making revolutionary advances in the field of biogenetics research.
These dark images, too, set the stage for a darker Tekken.
With this dream in his mind, Yoshimitsu decided to enter the tournament immediately. He must defeat Heihachi Mishima at any cost.
Nothing could prepare me for Kazuya's story, where you get to the 7th fight and the game announces that your opponent Jin has gone missing, and that you've been promoted to the next fight. But with this music, it was like some kind of horror game event had just happened. It was like, geez, chill. In Tekken 3, you get to the character select, and the music is an assault. It's like, hell yeah, time to rock out and get down to business. However, you boot up the character select in Tekken 4, and the music instead is like transcendental or something.
Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4.
Like you're taken off into a new plane of existence. The computer demons greet you with this distorted chatter. It's like we're ascending here with the new leap in tech. This game really likes to throw ominous chants into the soundtrack, as if the digital angels are grabbing you and taking you off with them. One theme that's stuck in my head forever is the airport theme. The high-pitched, echoing notes giving the stage a vast and unknowable yet relaxing feel. Lee's lab has an eerie feel, with the smoke and the music that sounds meandering and tired and dreamy, like a worn-out tape struggling to play. Beat a story mode, and you're greeted by an evil theme on the credits that sounds like a dial-up connection is trying to start up. It's like now that you've beaten the game, the program you're interfacing with is breaking down and you're about to get booted out back to the real world. In general, this feels like the most sinister Tekken game. Just Jin's face, obscured by that hoodie on the cover, is a menacing way to present your product. The rooftop theme expresses beauty with its piano intertwined with the digital bleeps and bloops that still lend it a computerized feel. So melancholic, right? The solitude of being up amidst this dense, populated city, but nevertheless alone. Well, at least with one other person, I guess, trying to beat you up, but that's par for the course with video game rooftops. I like how on this stage, when a round ends, these badass drums kick in to add some intensity to the replay. I have to remind you, the previous generation of Tekken looked like this, and now we're up here, add in great sound, and the atmosphere was on another level entirely. I always thought the pre-rendered character select faces were crazy back then. That's just a real guy. Poor Phoenix is real. Now, the feel of playing a more quote-unquote virtual reality Tekken is not just conveyed through graphics and music, but also in the play. The environments are detailed, but feel much more like real places, with slopes and inclines, walls and pillars that can be collided with. This was the first time the fights in a Tekken game felt like they were happening in an actual place, and not in like a turn-based RPG alternate reality battle arena. Even compared to the side game Tag Tournament, which came out between 3 and 4, and had higher fidelity visuals compared to 3, it's night and day. Now that we've ditched these uncanny-looking scrolling backgrounds for fully realized 3D environments. The addition of more interactive environments also feeds into the gameplay. You have this repositioning move you can use to push people into walls and pummel the shit out of them. It gives the combat an extra layer of grittiness. You end up stuck with your opponent in more confined spaces, increasing the brutality. The game is also slower than Tekken 3, adding a bit more weighty realism to things. But I'll be honest, this aspect of things was hard to notice since PAL copies of 3 run slower than their NTSC counterparts. I suppose Tekken 3 looked more like this in the US. Tekken 4 runs the same in all regions though, so in the UK, it's harder to notice the slower gameplay when jumping up to 4. So over here you might have not noticed any intent to change the speed of Tekken and only improvements in the feel. Similar speed with harder impact. But regardless, that noticeable change in other regions to slower play would indicate an attempt to make Tekken a more grounded, less cartoony fighter. Now don't get me wrong, to say Tekken 4 is realistic would be inaccurate, but it's about as grounded as you can make Tekken before it stops resembling Tekken. I think there's a good balance in terms of tone, accentuating the grit of Tekken without losing the charm. While the main characters have pretty serious storylines, depending on who you play as, there's still a lot of comedic elements to be found here, like in any Tekken. I'd say overall there's definitely a lean towards a more serious, grounded style, which for Tekken specifically I quite liked. This series where all the heroes are side characters, and the main characters are all arrogant badmans one-upping each other. Anyway, keep in mind, this video isn't an assessment of Tekken 4 as a fighting game. All these changes make it a very divisive title in the series, but perhaps you can see how all of these changes feed into a very cool tone and style. The more realistic stages, the toning down of the grand arcadey spectacle for these more intimate beatdowns, the graphics, the sleek modern aesthetic, the dark tone of the story, those nods and the sound of the game towards an ominous digital frontier we were hurtling towards. It made it come across like the world of Tekken was being brought closer to reality through new technology. Like we were getting to experience what these characters and their abilities might look like in the real world, funneled into ours through the new power of the PS2. And yeah, you can say some sacrifices were made to get us there, and that the series perhaps for the better abandoned that direction to go back to being more extravagant and gamey and over the top. But as a one-off experiment in this franchise, I do really like it, and I think it fits the franchise rather well. It's probably the only time I've taken the story of Tekken seriously, but that might be a little consolation to people who just don't like the fighting system in this one. In general though, I feel like the attempts at making games more realistic in the early 2000s were more genuine and less pretentious than they would become. Take a title from the 2010s, like Evil Within, a game literally about using technology to enter an alternate reality that seems to want to make you forget you're playing a game and make it feel more like a film you're controlling, slapping cinema bars on the gameplay as you collect green goop of all things. But in the 2000s, the way games presented themselves, it seemed like they didn't want to hide that it was cool tech that was allowing this higher fidelity. The fact that you were interfacing with technology was made part of the aesthetic in a lot of titles. They leaned into this idea that the excitement over realism in games was about getting to experience the fantasy of stepping through a digital portal into the uncertain and thrilling cyber realm. That honesty seeped into the style of the games of the time, and made Tekken 4's dip to more realism more palatable. Even if you could argue as a competitive fighter that didn't benefit Tekken, it made Tekken 4 a very memorable experience.